Bismillah and Assalamu alaikum. My topic today is entitled Two Rivers, a World Heritage of Entanglement, an Assertion of Our African Identity. And the key question is, why is it important to assert our African identity? In 2002, the area known as the Two Rivers Urban Park was established as a conservation area recognized for both its heritage and its environmental sensitivities. This terrain is one of the most historical significant areas in Southern Africa. It is an epicenter of colonial conquest and the first wars of resistance were fought here. It is a sacred terrain that connects us with our common humanity. What's important for us here is to look at an unrecognized achievement that was fought by the indigenous communities in the first instance on the 1st of March 1510. The Portuguese viceroy to India, Francisco de Almeida, had conquered and sacked the Indian peninsula. He was also in control of both East and West Africa, and on his way down to the Cape of Good Hope, he had left a very bloody trail of pillage and squander. However, across the terrain of the embankments of the Lisbech River on March 1st, 1510, Portugal suffered its greatest defeat at the hands of a resisting Khoi army that stopped his act of aggression, killing him and 87 of his men, including approximately 14 captains of the mighty Portuguese fleet. Traditional oral historical accounts speak of the raid at what is today Odemolen, where Almeida's men kidnapped some children and abused women. On the way back, they were encountered by a standing army who had a symbiotic relationship with their cattle. The cattle formed a phalanx, and with bows, arrows, and stones, the Khoi drove the Portuguese to the shoreline and defeated them on what is today known as the Battle of Salt River. This deep relationship the Khoi had with their animals is exemplified in this piece of history. The animals could sense, along with their human brethren, the dread of an existential threat and fought as one against a tyrant whose infamy had traveled across the waves long before his arrival. But let's move about 100 years on. During this time, over 1,000 ships had docked on our soil, and the shoreline was managed by a very sophisticated and multilingual community called the Goringhaicona, who were a mix of various peninsular Khoi groupings, influenced by significant leaders, namely Khoi and Auchumao, under the great chief Gogosoe. Khoi and Auchumao were trained internationally in London and in Java. Auchumao later was termed by Jan van Riebeeck as Harry the Strandloper. This group of Khoi were able, through the use of very robust diplomacy, not only maintain a form of tacit peace with ships who were carrying slaves, ships who were part of vessels under the ordinance of powers with very, very clear colonial ambitions, managed to sustain an active trading point at a very strategic point on the continent and the world, and healed sailors and others as they got off these ships after perilously long journeys. Journeys like these had very high mortality rates. History does not talk about our indigenous community and the flourishing cosmopolitan interface at Table Bay, at the mouth of the Kamisa River, a river which now runs underground under concrete bulk near the city of Cape Town. It is filled instead with harmful stereotypes. For instance, Auchumao was described by Jan van Riebeeck in his diaries as a dishonest, opportunistic thief, known as Harry the Strandloper, while his niece, Kotoa, the matriarchal figure of the Khoi resistance, was smeared as an alcoholic prostitute. Auchumao was in fact the commander of the port and leader of the Goringhaicona group who fought against the Dutch in the frontier wars, together with the other peninsular Khoi groups. His traditional stature, as well as his extraordinary talents and achievements, have been deliberately downplayed in the articulation of his life. A clear role model for future generations has been reduced to a criminal. Similarly, Kotoa was the umbilical cord between the Khoi and the Dutch. She played a crucial yet burdensome diplomatic role between Jan van Riebeeck and her people. Kotoa and her uncle Auchumao were of the first political prisoners on Robben Island, Auchumao being the first to escape it. Yet these stereotypes have fractured and misled our communities into an understanding of our identities imbued with shame and denial in ways that have divorced us from our Africanness. Our sense of belonging and custodianship of the environment and the land through these tales have led to our continued self-alienation and disenfranchisement. In 1657 was the beginning of the absolute colonial conquest of this country in Southern Africa as we know it. The Dutch East India Company decided to gift its employees, called the Freeburgers, farms on the embankments of the sacred river, now known as the Liesbeek, in what is today modern observatory. This is the place where the imposition of Roman Dutch law was used as a tool to justify the theft of land from indigenous communities for agricultural purposes. And these occupied territories expanded. The local inhabitants were cut off from the river and forcefully removed. This is the site of the very first land theft and brutal occupation in our country. The Freeburger farmers needed to yield produce for their capricious master, the Dutch East India Company. It was the largest corporation in the world. It had its own freestanding army, its own ships, and it wielded the kind of power any empire would. The Freeburger were at war with the resisting Khoi, and simultaneously faced the fact that they didn't have any labor to toil the topsoil. So the solution was for the Dutch East India Company to import slaves from around its colonies. From this, we saw the arrival of people from Guinea, Angola, Mozambique, East Africa, Madagascar, India, Sri Lanka, Southeast Asia, Indonesia, Malaysia, and the entire Javanese archipelago, bringing a large Muslim diaspora who have become part of this soil as a country, as they tilled the topsoil for the first time. And those who decided to escape their enslavement were welcomed by the Khoi, who shared a common enemy with them, namely the Dutch. This also resulted in the First Frontier War in 1659, which precipitated into 16 wars of resistance that fanned over and across southern Africa for the next 184 years. The impact of what is called the Khoi Mfecane, or forced migration, can be felt across southern Africa, including Namibia, Botswana, Angola, Zimbabwe, and beyond. From here, we can trace the genocide of the Cape San, an unrecognized atrocity to this day. With the unique entanglement of people, we identify this area of the Two Rivers Urban Park of gamerodi khaes as a place where Afrikaans emerged, a conference of languages, a unique Creole born from the Kombes area, where people from around the world together forged with local languages, creating for themselves a very unique dialect. The true origins of Afrikaans were erased from the African Creole roots by white supremacy. When indigenous language speakers were forbidden to speak their own languages, colonial authorities deployed mutilating methods to stop them from speaking. For example, the removal of frontal teeth was done to prevent people from clicking. So the four major clicks that also inform the Nguni languages are from Khoi. From this place, we see the extinction and extirpation of sacred animals, the bluebuck, the mountain lion, and the quagga. The eradication of these sacred and spiritually significant animals created another kind of trauma for the San and Khoi people. These animals represented important links in the realm of the ritual and spirituality. So when we talk about reparations and restorative justice, it's not only within the tangible, but also within the intangible. This is a place where the South African Astronomical Observatory, previously known as the Royal Observatory, was built on top of a mound where the early indigenous people would analyze the stars for themselves. It has a very unique genus loci. It has an uninterrupted view of that particular side of the mountain, Devil's Peak, and importantly, it is the only place from the confluence of the river on the equinox, when days and nights are equal in length, that you can see the sun sitting on top of the lion's head. This place is known as gamerodi khaes, which means the place of the stars. I will now quote from a book written by Dr. Imam Abdul Rashid Omar, and on rediscovering our African identity. And he says, a large percentage of the Muslims of the Western Cape are descendants and offspring of a 3 centuries old process of intermarriage and ethnic mixing, perhaps unique in South African history. We are offspring of exiles and slaves who intermarried with indigenous Khoi and San, as well as European settlers. It is this phenomena which led Mahmoud Mamdani to describe the so-called coloureds of the Western Cape as Creolized Africans. Creole meaning locally born, locally made. Like, for example, a language that originates somewhere but is then changed into a new setting. This is how we should see ourselves, as locals having distant links from all over the world but rooted deeply in the soil. Unquote. Today, there are a number of leading scholars and political activists and artists who are part of a movement committed to addressing this problem. One can get further insight in terms of histories and kinds of histories that are being relooked and interrogated through a decolonial lens. Useful books like Laban's The Land Wars, Patrick Tauriq Mellett's The Lie of 1652, Muhammad Dadikari's book, The Genocide in South Africa, Professor Siraj Rasul's book, Skeletons in the Cupboard, Dr. Reuben Richards' Bastards or Humans, Dr. June Bam Hutchinson's Rethinking Africa, Indigenous Women Reinterpret Southern Africa's Pasts, and Professor Lungisile Nsebeza's Whose History Counts are but a few important titles that I would recommend. But we have also witnessed some groundbreaking events, such as the University of Cape Town's decision to change the name from Jameson Hall to Sarabatma, and the renaming now of Smuts Hall. The Rhodes Must Fall movement played a significant role in the paving of these name changes. Significantly now, however, as tech companies have become the latest economic power to recolonize Africa and land grabs proliferate across the continent, a battle of deep colonial significance is taking place between tech giant Amazon and traditional and grassroots and environmental and civic activists. This, after the city of Cape Town gave the go-ahead for a massive multi-billion rand development on the River Club, with Amazon as its anchor tenant. We, together with 60 allies consisting of civic and environmental groups, including most of the Khoi and San, are fighting a final frontier battle for this ancient floodplain that is under imminent threat by, once again, the largest corporation on earth. It wishes to put its African headquarters on top of the sacred floodplain, with 150,000 square meters of commercial bulk, which goes against provincial, national, and international environmental policies as it violates the Paris Accords. And unfortunately, this is all being done in the name of the San and Khoi, without their consent, and without the consent of the people of Cape Town, and without the consent of the people of South Africa. We have seen a number of disturbing divide and conquer tactics being leveraged against the unity of indigenous groups. But our key demands include that this area is recognized as a provincial, national, and a UNESCO World Heritage Site, that it be a site dedicated to the untold history of the genocide of the Cape San, a site that would be a symbolic place of reference and utilization for the purposes of a San and Khoi Truth and Reconciliation Commission, a site that acknowledges the linguistic ethnocide of how plants in the region have been named and framed outside of their cultural and geospecific areas, a site demarcated to restoring the significance of the pre-colonial peopling of the area that nurtured the coexistence of plant, animal, water, and the cosmos in ways respectful of such elements' dignity and right to live and have a place under the sun. That the proposed River Club development, in every single one of its manifestations, be rejected. I would like to read a few excerpts from the letter of support from this mosque. The Claremont Main Road Mosque advocates the view that conscientious Muslims should live in reverence and harmony with nature. The Claremont Road Mosque was established in 1854 and one of the oldest buildings in the Newlands Claremont area. It is situated in Main Road Claremont, an area now denuded of a surrounding Muslim community that was forcibly removed as a result of the Group Areas Act in the 1960s. We know too well the injustice on people's culture and heritage when displaced from their land. We therefore believe it is an injustice to the heritage and history of the Khoi people and our city, as well as being destructive to the environment for any further development to take place on the River Club site. In conclusion, the River Club precinct may be privately owned, but that history belongs to humanity itself. It also belongs to the Khoi and San who once roamed the area for a millennia. The relevance and significance cannot be undone, not with concrete, landfill, hotels, nor with threats of a redirected river channel. It is a sacred space that holds the opportunity to heal our nation. It was a great hurt when that first pole was placed by Jan van Riebeeck onto this ancient terrain, the embankments of this once Sweetwater. This action stabbed at the oldest root of collective memory, one which lies on the banks of the Liesbeek River and the Black River. The wound holds a trauma everyone in this country faces, whether subconsciously or in the realm of day. It is an original sin that binds us as it divides us. It is time we pause and begin to restore. At the dawn of our Constitution in 1996, the then Vice President Thabo Mbeki said in his famous I Am an African speech the following: I owe my being to the Khoi and San, whose desolate souls haunt the great expanses of the beautiful Cape. Today, as a country, we keep an audible silence about these ancestors of the generations that live, fearful to admit the horror of a former deed, seeking to obliterate from our memories a cruel occurrence which, in its remembering, should teach us not and never to be inhuman again. I will now end off with a poem written by one of our ancestors in 1876, Dagba. Did you not hear the Hamakop when the star fell? It came to tell us that our person is dead. The Hamakop lives at the water which is like a pool, in which we see all things. The things which are in the sky, we see in the water while we stand on the water's edge. We see all things. I wish to take this opportunity again to thank Claremont Maynard Mosque for inviting me today and to wish everyone a blessed Jumu'ah. Shukran. Assalamu alaikum